We're very excited to announce that today's video is sponsored by Audible. More on that later. Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, Operation Market Garden, a World War II tutorial on how not to use paratroopers. On September 17, 1944, several thousand Allied airborne dropped from the skies into the Nazi-occupied Netherlands. More landed the next day and the day after. Comprising British, American, and even Polish troops, this force constituted the single largest airborne operation in history. Its objective was to open up a route to the German industrial heartland, the Ruhr Valley, in an attempt to end the war early. Instead, Market Garden ended up being one of the greatest Allied setbacks of the Second World War. In this video, we're going to be going through the operation day by day and location by location to explore why Market Garden was a bridge too far. Market Garden was the brainchild of Bernard Montgomery, famous for commanding British forces during the late North African campaign. It was designed to test Bernard's favored strategy for the final phase of the war in Europe by concentrating Allied forces for a small yet powerful thrust into Germany. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower, whom Montgomery often clashed with, had been championing a so-called broad strategy of keeping Allied forces distributed along a wide front, putting pressure on German positions along the entire border. When offensive progress began to slow following the liberation of Brussels in early September, Eisenhower gave the go-ahead to implement a smaller-scale version of Montgomery's plans for a narrow front. His approval was designed to test both the strategic viability of such a thrust and the effectiveness of the Allied Airborne Army, still relatively new to the field of battle. So what was Montgomery's proposal? The plan called for a massive flanking maneuver around the heavily fortified German Siegfried Line through the Low Countries. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's exactly what the Germans did to the French in both world wars, with varying degrees of success. Hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Market Garden was actually the combination of two component operations named, you guessed it, Market and Garden. Operation Market was the airborne component, in which paratroopers would land at several points between the Dutch cities of Arnhem and Eindhoven to secure the bridges over the Meuse, Veyle, and Lower Rhine rivers, as well as a number of canals. If you've ever been to the Netherlands, you'll know it's about 70% river, so these points had to be taken before Operation Garden, the large-scale deployment of armor over the Dutch-German border, could commence. This joint force, which consisted of 50,000 troops of the 30th Corps under Lieutenant General Brian Herricks, was to begin in the southwest and end at Arnhem. Allied commanders hoped that if Market Garden was successful, they could end the war by Christmas of 1944. Before we delve into the details about what exactly transpired, there's a few things we should go over. First off, to those who don't know already, paratroopers are light infantry units who can't carry very heavy weapons, so historically they have had to rely on surprise and speed to gain the advantage. Throughout this video, you'll notice how the Allies failed to play at those strengths. Moreover, Operation Market Garden was predicated on an overly optimistic timetable that assumed that the paratroopers could hold out long enough for the 30th Corps to reach them. On top of that, the soft Dutch soil was judged to be impassable for mechanized and heavy armor, so the 30th Corps had to follow a single paved highway. That narrow channel of movement left them badly exposed to German anti-tank fire from all sides while traveling. Furthermore, Allied planners did not heed a report from the Dutch resistance that a veteran Panzer Corps was stationed nearby, undergoing maintenance, but still capable of defensive deployment. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a great way to lose rock, paper, scissors, or, infantry tank, anti-tank. Now, let's get on to the operation. Tomorrow, we go into action. If by sacrificing all this, I leave a world slightly better than I found it, I am perfectly willing to make that sacrifice. Private Ivor Robery, South Stratfordshire Regiment, killed in action, September 17th, 1944. An air armada of nearly 1,500 Allied aircraft and more than 400 gliders take to the skies. The paratroopers aboard these planes will be dropped far into enemy territory, completely surrounded and nearly 60 miles away from friendly territory. In the early afternoon, the first paratroopers hit the ground. The initial insertions are actually quite successful, with soldiers at all major sites accurately hitting their landing zones. However, Lloyd Clark, a military historian at the University of Buckingham, notes that the Allied operation began with airborne troops accurately hitting their drop zones, yet their very success actually assisted the German response from the start. Because the troops weren't scattered, the Germans could easily pinpoint where they had hit the ground and make a quick deduction of the likely objectives of the Allied operation. Furthest to the north is Arnhem, where the 1st British Airborne Division under Major General Roy Auchart are to take a road bridge and a rail bridge that both cross the Lower Rhine. Auchart's force lands a dozen miles to the west of their targets due to a concentration of German anti-aircraft batteries near the town of Oosterbeek. They are forced to fight through scattered German opposition to reach their objectives. This resistance does not initially stop Auchart's men, but it does seriously delay them. What's more, the Allies lack enough planes to transport all of the men required for this attack. Thus, a large contingent of the 1st Airborne must stay behind to protect the landing sites and supply drops. In yet another stroke of bad luck, the radio sets the British are using experience technical failure that effectively eliminates General Auchart's ability to communicate with his men or with artillery and air support. While the Germans are getting more organized, the Allies are getting progressively less organized. Only the 750-man 2nd Battalion, commanded by John Frost, reaches either of the division's objectives. Their secondary objective, a rail bridge, is destroyed just as they arrive, so they hastily move on towards their primary target, the Arnhem Bridge, and hold up in 18 houses just north of the bridge. Reinforcements are stopped by the German Kampfgruppe Spindler, assembled primarily from elements of the 9th SS Panzer Division, leaving Frost on his own for the time being. To the south, the US 82nd Airborne Infantry Division under Brigadier General Jim Gavin, or Jumpin' Jim as his men like to call him, lands with 7,500 troops near Nijmegen. They take the southernmost of their 2 objectives, a bridge over the Maas River, as well as the undefended Groesbeck Heights to the southeast, where supplies and reinforcements will be dropped in the coming days. From here, they begin shelling the nearby forest of Reichswald, from which they expect a German counterattack, though they aren't certain. Later that same day, a small detachment of 400 men is sent to capture the 2nd bridge over the Vale River, just north of Nijmegen. Unfortunately for the Americans, the 10th SS Panzer Division, made up of approximately 3,000 men, rushes in to stop them from reaching their objective. In Eindhoven, the 101st Airborne under Maxwell D. Taylor lands and captures 3 of 5 intended targets. Crucially, however, the men of the 101st fail to take the crossings at Best and Sun, which Nazi forces blow up behind them. Both of these bridges cross the same canal, so at least one has to be reconstructed if troops are going to cross. The process greatly slows down the advance. Worse still, an Allied glider attached to the 101st crashes and plans for the entire operation fall into German hands. Despite some success, Operation Market Garden is not exactly off to an auspicious start. The landing was due at 10 o'clock, but it came and went, and no aircraft, gliders, or anything appeared. Gordon Jock Walker, Sergeant, British Army Film and Photographic Unit. The next morning, poor weather in England prevents the launch of a 2nd Airborne wave that was initially scheduled for 0600 hours. That deployment, and many of the subsequent supply drops scheduled for today, fail to arrive on time, if they arrive at all. As dawn breaks, John Frost is all alone. He and the 2nd Battalion are in Arnhem, repelling contingents of the Kampfgruppe Spindler that scrambled up from Nijmegen to the south the night before. The 2nd Battalion is doing an admirable job, but is surrounded and running low on supplies. The 1st and 3rd slowly make their way into western Arnhem, but are stopped by German forces in the city and do not successfully link up with the 2nd. Meanwhile, the 4th Battalion finally makes their landing, but does not join the rest of the division on this day. Ockart himself is pinned down during the advance of the 1st Battalion and actually hides inside of a Dutch house for the day. Without a functioning radio to keep in contact with his men, he is considered missing in action, thereby putting Brigadier General Philip Hicks in temporary command. In Nijmegen, the Americans of the 82nd have beaten back a small German attack and are reinforced with a second wave of paratroopers. However, they have yet to take the all-important Vale Bridge, and the Germans have begun crossing the river by boat, setting up defensive positions around the Americans' objectives. German commanders, now in possession of the Allied war plans, conclude that victory at Nijmegen is crucial to the overall defeat of Market Garden. Victory at Arnhem and Eindhoven would be meaningless without a route between them. Speaking of which, the British 30th Corps arrives in Eindhoven late in the day and begins construction of a makeshift bridge, while the 101st Airborne holds off attacks from a handful of hastily assembled German forces from the west. I think we're going a bridge too far. Lieutenant General Frederick Browning apocryphally during the planning of Operation Market Garden. In Arnhem, John Frost is outnumbered, outgunned, and becoming increasingly desperate. His forces now occupy only 10 houses on the northern side of Arnhem Bridge. The 2nd Battalion is unable to stop German tanks from crossing and comes under heavy artillery fire. The remaining battalions make one more push to move through western Arnhem and are beaten back so severely that they actually have to retreat past their original landing zones, meaning that the Germans would get their hands on all of the new supplies. In the confusion, Ockart does manage to rejoin the 1st Airborne, at least what was left of it. Meanwhile, the 1st Polish Independent Paratrooper Brigade, meant to reinforce the British division, is still unable to deploy because of poor weather in England and the Netherlands. Meanwhile, the 30th Corps finishes construction and proceeds to Nijmegen, where it links up with the 82nd Airborne. The newly combined force attempts to take the Vale Bridge, but advances only slowly. Lastly, the 101st Airborne is still holding its position in the south and repels a counterattack against the makeshift crossing by the 107th Panzer Division. Hand grenades flew in every direction. Each house had to be taken this way. Some of the British offered resistance to their last breath, a German soldier at Arnhem. The rest of the 1st Airborne gives up hope of reaching the 2nd Battalion, as it is pushed into an increasingly compact area around eastern Oosterbeek. Frost himself is captured. The Polish reinforcements are nowhere to be found. However, hope comes from the south, as Allied forces in Nijmegen finally make some progress. By sending a contingent of troops across the river by boat and attacking the Germans from the rear, the 30th Corps and 82nd Airborne finally take control of the bridge at Nijmegen by the end of the day. The retreating Germans attempt and fail to destroy the crossing on their way out. Surprisingly, the 30th Corps does not immediately move out, as several of their elements are still pinned down in the city. A rare bright spot for the Allies in this operation, the capture of Nijmegen means that the center of their corridor is secure for now. Out of ammunition, God save the King. Final transmission from the 2nd Battalion, 1st British Airborne Division on September 24th, 1944. The 2nd Battalion at Arnhem Bridge is completely wiped out by overwhelming German forces today, ending their impressive holdout. Approximately 1,984 men are killed and 6,854 captured. Ockart does not have time to grieve. The remaining members of the 1st Airborne, now only 3,500 out of 10,000, try to hold on to a strip of land north of the river where a potential new bridge could be constructed. Throughout the day, 750 Polish fighters, roughly at half strength under Stanisław Sosabowski, finally touched down in Driel to the southeast under a rain of gunfire. The onslaught decimates them as the 30th Corps, relentlessly harassed by German artillery fire, finally gets in range of Oosterbeek and starts to provide supporting fire. The soldier on the stretcher at my feet lay upwards, his eyes heavily bandaged. I had no further use now for my steel helmet, so I took it off and covered his face. Godfrey Friedman, British glider pilot, captured at Arnhem. Today, the tides really start to turn against the Allies. In Arnhem, 60 Poles managed to cross the Rhine and join with the 1st Airborne, which itself is now running out of supplies. Bad weather has deprived them of crucial air support as well as the ability to resupply. When German Colonel Kurt Student launches a massive counterattack against both sides of the Eindhoven-Nijmegen corridor, the 30th Corps and 82nd Airborne have to take valuable time to re-establish a link to the south. Ockart is still alone and the walls are closing in. German snipers are beginning to infiltrate his lines, and he has fewer than 2,000 utterly exhausted men left. Saturday morning, a brief truce is declared, and 1,200 wounded British and Polish soldiers are taken prisoner. We did not get our final bridgehead, and that must be admitted. General Bernard Montgomery. A small number of men from the 30th Corps manages to reach Driel and establishes a connection with what's left of the 1st Airborne, while 300 more Poles make it across the river in attack boats. All of this is too little, too late. Allied commanders are no longer discussing the possibility of reinforcement. Their only hope is evacuation. Under the cover of darkness and artillery fire, the 1st Airborne Division and their Polish allies make their way across the Rhine and back to safety. All told, 1,741 of the 10,000 men dropped as part of the 1st Airborne Division make it back to Allied territory. So, what went wrong? Basically everything, even the weather. As we've already mentioned, the airborne troops were ill-equipped to face armored divisions stationed in the area, and the Germans seemed to know exactly where to place their defenders. That problem was compounded by the fact that the British Army lacked the aircraft to drop the 1st Airborne all at once. You tend to lose the element of surprise when you have to drop your men into the same spot over multiple days. Members of the Dutch underground provided warnings about the 99th Panzers, but may have also compromised the operation from the start. The Germans as a whole were also being commanded by a renowned defensive strategist, Field Marshal Walter Model, who was able to oversee his forces from his HQ in Arnhem itself. As for Allied command, historians tend to focus on Lieutenant General Frederick Browning, who was in charge of the 1st Allied Airborne Army. But their focus was not one born out of admiration, but rather of sharp criticism. In fact, many historians, as well as General John Frost, point to him as bearing at least some of the blame for why the operation went downhill. Rather than any one issue in particular, a number of factors had to go wrong all at once for Market Garden to fail as spectacularly as it did. Among these problems were the placement of the 1st Airborne's drop zone too far from Arnhem Bridge, its communication blackout, the 24-hour delay of the 30th Corps, the decision at Nijmegen to delay the capture of the Vale Bridge by several hours after landing, ultimately delaying the 30th Corps even further, and relentlessly unfavorable weather. Nonetheless, Market Garden was not a complete failure, at least according to the memoir of Bernard Montgomery, published 14 years later.
I knew my stuff, sir, and that, I think, was a...
Did you ever lose a battle, Field Marshal?
No.
Yes, that's the important thing, isn't it?
If you'd like to learn more about the later stages of the Second World War with some of my favorite books on the topic, we have an exciting announcement for you. The Last 100 Days by John Tolland and If You Survive by George Wilson are both available among the unmatched selection of audiobooks on Audible. These two books in particular do a spectacular job of describing the downfall of Germany in the Second World War and the Allied push from D-Day to victory. Try Audible for free for 30 days and get your first audio audiobook for free. Audible has titles on just about every topic we've covered on this channel, and much more. Visit audible.com/armchairhistorian or text armchairhistorian to 500-500. If you become a member, you'll unlock one of my favorite features, Audible Originals, which gives you access to a wide array of tales told by acclaimed storytellers in the worlds of history, politics, literature, and more. Trust me when I say that with Audible, you'll be set for long car rides, workout sessions, and errands alike. So join us and the other armchair historians who have already signed up and visit audible.com/armchairhistorian or text armchairhistorian to 500-500.